Do you consider being single, married, or involved as part of your identity? Why or why not?
I think it's a part of every person's identity, whether they're female or male, and I think that society is always asking us to fill out forms and to define our marital status. So I think that for me, the more important point is whether you are happily single or involved or married. So I'm a happily single person.
Right. Is being single or married perceived differently in your own country, Canada?
Yes.
In comparison to Japan?
Yes, I would say definitely it is. One of the things that's come out in interviews here in Japan is the tendency for people to be invited as a single in their workplace to events. And so whether or not you're a married person, you are seen as an individual member of a team. And so that's something that I think is interesting, because the single women in Canada often talk about the difficulty of negotiating the +1 on invitations. Also, the fact that there's no Miss and Mrs. differentiation, I think, is another thing that makes everybody sort of more on equal terrain, so to speak.
So, socially, single women and married women in Japan are supposed to go to the same events.
Yes, and in the workplace, whether you're married or single, you'd go to the same events, but you wouldn't bring your partner.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
How do you see single women being represented by the media and by society at large? And how about single men?
Okay, I think that the story of single women in Japanese media right now is sort of showing 20 or 25 years earlier what we were seeing in the North American media. And so it's focusing on how women are having a big role in the workplace, but then once they are faced with a marriage proposal, they feel that they have to choose between the two. Fortunately, in my opinion, that's not a A-B choice that is required of women in the North American media, where it's more an issue of work-life balance and juggling how you're going to be able to get the best out of both worlds.
And what about single men?
Single men. Single men are interesting. I think that the idea that for men they choose to give up their singleness makes it a different story than for women. So whereas women are told that they have to wait to be asked, men, if they haven't asked yet, it's because they're seen as having chosen to remain single.
So, in other words, it's not necessarily a woman's option to ask a man for his hand in marriage.
Right. Yeah. Except it's interesting here in Japan because we have the omiai situation, and so a lot of the Japanese women I interviewed said that, in fact, if they did want to marry, if they saw it as sort of a business relationship, they could enter into a marriage through a matchmaker.
Can you expand a little bit on the business relationship?
That instead of seeing it as something that's a soulmate ideology and that the only person you're supposed to marry is the person who completes you, here in Japan it's seen more as something that you're entering into together in order to manage a household, manage a family. And so perhaps the expectations are a bit different, and who knows, maybe they're actually more manageable.
How are single and married women treated differently in the workplace?
I think that's a complicated one. I think it really depends on the workplace, but I think that there is often the perception that singles have less obligations and responsibilities outside of work. And so there have been a lot of complaints from women that I've interviewed that there was the expectation that they could do extra hours, or that if a mother out in the workplace had something that she needed to attend to with her kids, she could go. Whereas there are, of course, different responsibilities and pursuits that singles have in their lives that should also be given that same recognition, and that everybody who works in the workplace should have equal responsibilities and equal time off.
Do you feel that's the same for Japanese and non-Japanese women?
That's a good question. I think most of the women that I've interviewed in Japan are in academic and very advanced middle management, upper management kinds of positions. So I think that their work is very involved. But I think because we have a large group of women who are working on a temporary track in Japan, it would be very interesting to explore that further.
What resources can single women draw upon to empower themselves both inside and outside the workplace?
I hope that their strongest resource would be other women. I think that it's really important that we as single women share our lives with people, because if people don't know what's going on in our lives, then perhaps they don't recognize that we have full lives as well. But I think that finding solidarity in your female colleagues, but also in your male colleagues as well, and making sure that you take advantage of mentors who make themselves available to you, and just get involved to make sure that your presence is known and appreciated.
In terms of the mentors, either choosing a man or a woman, Any advice about how to seek that?
Yeah, I read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, and I think that it's really important to have a mentor. I would actually say that the quality of the mentor is much more important than their gender. I've had, actually, I think out of the 5 mentors that I would count as really, really important to me, 1 was a woman and the rest have all been male. And so I think that if you just find somebody who supports your passions and recognizes what you bring to the workplace, that's the person you want to stick with. Yeah.
And last, how can we be better allies to single women?
I would say just make sure that things aren't about this is a couples event, this is a singles event. Let's make sure it's a people event. Recognize that diversity is a good thing. Recognize that everybody has made choices and continues to make choices and that all of them are valid. So whatever our marital status is, hopefully we're happily choosing it. And I think that we should just support lots of choices and just support each other.
On the flip side, how can single women be better allies?
To themselves?
To themselves, to the people around them.
I think it all comes down to, like, I don't like to actually see it as 2 groups. Like, I think that we all should be supporting more choices for women. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about in my presentation tonight is just that there's a whole lot of discourses about how women should be choosing their life courses and whether or not you're being judged on your parenting or whether you're child-free in a couple or whether you're single or married. I think that instead of focusing on the things that make us different, I think we should be focusing on the things that make us the same. And but in the same in that same voice, I would also say that I think it's important that we see all of our diversity as a strength.
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome. Thank you.